And once you start recording, I'll get called to order. All right, it's 12 o'clock. I'll call this meeting in order. Let the record reflect all members except Director Scatini, Director Borzini, and Director Eklund are present. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on the closed session item?
No hands raised.
And Director Smith is not here as well. All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll close public comment for the closed session item, and we'll now go into closed session. Thank you. All right, I'll get back started. All right, we'll call meeting back to order. We just finished our closed session. Let the record reflect that all members are present except Director Borzini and Director Eklund. Council, was there any reportable actions?
No reportable actions.
Thank you. At this time, Director Sullivan, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Director, thank you, everyone. Clerk, was there any additions or corrections to the?
I just wanted to inform board members and the public that all presentation slides being presented today have been emailed.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to public comment. Is there any member of the public to speak on any item not on the agenda? Any online?
No hands raised.
And none in chambers, so we'll close public comment. We'll move to presentations. Our first one will be the review of the 2024 August groundwater elevation contour maps and seawater intrusion maps. And this will be presented by Guillermo, Ricardo, and Amy. And for efficiency, we'll save all of our questions and comments till after the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. My name is Guillermo Diaz. I'm a hydrologist with the agency, and this is my colleague Ricardo Carmona. And today we're going to present the 2024 August trough groundwater elevation contour maps and the 2024 seawater intrusion maps. STAT presented this data to the Basin Management Advisory Committee in December of 2024. All activities associated with this program are funded by Funds 111 and 116 and are included in each year's budget. These activities can be linked to strategic plan goals B7 and E1. First, here's an overview of the monitoring programs that we will be discussing today. The August groundwater elevation data and water quality data that is in and around the seawater intruded area are collected contemporaneously from similar geographic area. We present this data and the resulting maps together to comprehensively evaluate some of the factors affecting seawater intrusion, particularly regional groundwater gradients. The August groundwater level data are a snapshot of conditions within and beyond the seawater intruded area when aquifers are most stressed from groundwater pumping. And at the same time, we are also assessing groundwater conditions throughout the year to understand how aquifers are responding to different hydrologic conditions. So we will begin with the August trough survey. Before we look at the contours, I wanted to show this map, which displays all the wells that are included in our groundwater level programs, as well as the water quality wells. This includes the monthly August trough and annual programs, and all of these efforts are ongoing so that we can continue to monitor the health of the basin, evaluate different projects, and then help develop basin management strategies. So the August-Trough survey is done to create the August-Trough groundwater elevation contours, and it's done in a single day in August, always on a Sunday, where our staff goes out and samples around 135 wells from the coast to Chular. As I mentioned before, we consider this survey to be a snapshot of the groundwater level conditions in an area that is in and around the seawater intruded front at a time of the years when the aquifers are most stressed from pumping. So what are groundwater elevation contours? These are lines in a map that represent equal lines of groundwater levels or elevations relative to mean sea level. And the shape and spacing of these lines can indicate what the groundwater surface looks like. For example, if the lines are closer together, it indicates that there's a steeper gradient in the groundwater surface. And on the other hand, if the land lines are further apart, you'll have a much gentler slope. Thanks to these contours, we can also determine the general direction of groundwater flow, which is always going to be perpendicular to the lines and from a higher to a lower elevation. Now we'll move on to the August 2024 groundwater level contour maps. First, here we have the 180-foot and east side shallow aquifer set of contours. The red lines are our 10-foot increment groundwater elevation contours for 2024. And as we walk through the next slides, I will highlight some areas and add the 2023 set of contour lines in green for comparison. Starting near the coast, we saw levels increase between 1 and 3 feet from where they were last year, and as such, the -10 line has moved inland, and we also have the 0 line going along the coast, which means that groundwater elevations are just above sea level at the coast. In the east side, we saw an overall increase in groundwater levels ranging from 2 to 18 feet. However, there is a small area towards the southeast that did experience decreases of 1 to 5 feet. And moving up valley, we saw overall increases between 1 and 2 feet from last year in wells between Salinas and Chular, but there is also a smaller area towards Spreckles that saw a decrease between 1 and 2 feet. As I mentioned before, we can determine the general direction of groundwater flow with these lines, as shown by the blue arrows. Here you can see that the groundwater flow would be generally from the coast and the Salinas River towards the northeast of Salinas. Now we'll move on to the contours of the 400-foot aquifer and the deep zone of the east side. And just to clarify, when we talk about the east side deep or deep zone of the east side, we're not talking about the deep aquifers. Starting at the coast again, we saw increases of 1 and 2 feet. And as a result, the -10 and -20 line have moved inland, but we still do not have a 0 line. This means that groundwater elevations are below sea level at the coast. Moving towards the Espinosa Lake, we saw increases between 1 and 3 feet, with a smaller area that experienced decreases between 3 and 5 feet towards the northwest. On the east side area, we saw again an overall lessening of the east side trough with increases between 1 and 12 feet. However, there is also that small area towards the southeast that saw decreases between 1 and 10 feet. And then finally, we saw increases of 1 to 2 feet between Salinas and Chular, but there is also that small area towards Spreckles that did see a decrease between 1 and 2 feet. For this set of contours, we see a similar general direction of groundwater flow, again from the coast and the Salinas River towards the northeast of Salinas. And so to summarize, for the 180 and east side shallow set of contours, we saw an increase near the coast of 1 to 3 feet, an overall rise in the east side trough by 2 to 18 feet, an overall increase in elevations up valley of 1 to 2 feet, and localized decreases between 1 and 5 feet in smaller areas. And for the 400 and east side deep set of contours, we saw an increase near the coast of 1 to 2 feet, an overall rise of 1 to 3 feet in the area north of Espinosa Lake, an overall rise in the east side trough by 1 to 12 feet, an overall increase in elevations at valley of 1 to 2 feet, and also localized decreases between 1 and 10 feet in smaller areas.
Good afternoon. Yes, my name is Ricardo Carmona. I'm also a hydrologist at the agency, and I'm providing the board with an update on the 2024 seawater intrusion contour maps. So the seawater intrusion monitoring program involves collecting groundwater samples every year from wells that are located in the transition zone. This transition zone is the subsurface area where seawater mixes with fresh groundwater that's coming from inland aquifers. The geographical extent of this monitoring program covers the northern end of the Salinas Valley, and roughly speaking, goes from the coastline to the western side of the city of Salinas and between the south of Moss Landing and Marina. I'll be showing you a map of this on the next slide. During the summer season, between June and August of 2024, agency staff collected groundwater samples from 36 wells in the 180-foot aquifer and 74 wells in the 400-foot aquifer. And again, as every year, all samples are analyzed by Monterey County's Consolidated Chemistry Laboratory. And so here's in detail all of those wells in the transition zone that were sampled this year, including background control wells located further south in the vicinity of Chular. So in order to monitor the seawater intrusion, the agency utilizes chloride concentration and other chemical elements that are detected in the groundwater samples. The chloride concentration in the transition zone can range from 50 milligrams per liter, that being the native groundwater quality of the 180 and 400 foot aquifers, all the way up to 19,000 milligrams per liter, which is the concentration of chloride in the Pacific Ocean water. As defined in the ordinance number 3790, the agency uses the 500 milligrams of chloride per liter as the threshold for establishing seawater intrusion in the area. And then we use data analysis and mapping to make a final determination where we use a series of geochemical analysis and mapping tools to produce a representation of the seawater intrusion for the aquifers in that transition zone. The seawater intrusion maps include all of the historic 500 milligram per liter contours determined in previous years, in addition to the 500 milligram per liter contour and the 250 milligram per liter contour for this current year. This 250 milligram per liter contour is presented as an indicator of areas where the chloride concentrations are increasing. In addition, these intrusion maps also display seawater phase determination based on the geochemical composition of the sample water at each well. The seawater intrusion phase is evaluated by the agency using a graphic representation of the geochemical composition of the water sample. And we use this to identify trends over time. This is an example of a well that shows no indications of seawater intrusion between 1983 and 2024. And so in general, the composition of native groundwater in the Salinas Valley aquifers plots in the central area of the upper diagram, as you can see noted. And so wells that show a comparable trend as in this example, are determined as not intruded, and they are marked in the maps with a green circle. For comparison purposes, we also display the composition of seawater with a black dot on the diagram as well. And so this would be an example of phase 1, where the seawater intrusion has affected the aquifer by significant changes in its composition, such as the progressive increase of chloride. In this example, you can see how the plotted composition trends towards the top apex of the diagram over time. Phase 1 is identified with a orange square symbol on the seawater intrusion maps. And then we have phase 2, which indicates a more advanced status of the seawater intrusion, and it is identified when the quality of the sample water starts trending directly towards the composition of the seawater. Those wells with a comparable composition trend are determined as phase 2, and we mark them in the map as red triangles. So with all that, here's the updated seawater intrusion map for 2024. This is the one for 180-foot aquifer. And so in this year, we have observed that the 500 milligram contour has not changed significantly in respect to 2023. And no new contours have been identified for 2024. However, the line that we marked to designate the 250 milligrams per liter at the leading edge of the main lobe is showing a slight expansion towards the western city limit of Salinas, and it's marked in the slide. Most samples from wells in the 180-foot aquifer showed no change in seawater intrusion phase respect to 2023. We have only identified one well near the leading edge of the 250 milligram per liter contour, in which the phase evaluation progressed from not intruded to phase 1. And so still within the 180-foot aquifer, we want to present the cumulative acreage overlying the seawater intrusion, defined as the area that covered by the 500 milligram per liter of chloride. So in the blue line, we're indicating what's the cumulative acreage covered by the seawater intrusion. We also indicated some prorated acres per year, so that could be interpreted as a water intrusion rate. So most of these values are like prorated to give us an idea of how the water intrusion is progressing into the aquifer. And in the background and for reference, we have the water year types showing the precipitation trends for each year. Okay, so we're moving on to the 400-foot aquifer. So the main area of regional seawater intrusion near the coast did not show additional advancement in 2024, although there is a slight expansion of the 500 milligram per liter contour at the southeastern end of the intrusion island that developed to the east of the area. And so here's a closer look at that expansion that we have identified in near the McFadden Road and towards Highway 183. Excuse me. And so within the same aquifer, 7 wells located ahead of the eastern 250 contour line showed a progression from not intruded to phase 1 this year. I think I have them marked here, so you can spot where they are. And again, this is the cumulative acreage overlying the 500 milligram per liter chloride contour for the 400-foot aquifer. And so we just represented like what's that increase over time of all of the acreage that's signifying like the area that has expanded over time. And just to summarize, in the 180-foot aquifer, the seawater intrusion impacted area has not changed significantly in respect to 2023, except for the 250 milligram of chloride per liter contour that has advanced slightly towards the western city of Salinas. And for the 400-foot aquifer, the seawater intrusion has advanced slightly along the southeastern 500 milligram per liter contour that was identified previously in 2023. And I think that's the end of my presentation.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the presentation. Very well done. So let me start with the board members' questions and comments. Mike, and then do you have something? Then John?
Thank you for the presentation. A few questions. First off, why didn't we present the whole valley? We only showed the east 180, 400.
For the contours, you mean? Yeah. So as mentioned in the presentation, when we create the contours in August, we're looking at the same area that we're also analyzing for seawater intrusion.
Okay, but you don't think it relates to the whole valley of what's the contours in the upper valley and the forebay and how that relates to flows and contours and the.
Well. There is a correlation with what's happening in the upper valley, but the way that groundwater moves, it's at a rate that's too slow for us for it to make an actual impact on seawater intrusion at the moment when we're collecting those samples.
You know, it'd also be really nice if we could get Marina's data.
We will in the future. We're in conversations to get that data.
Because if you're looking at those flows of the 400 and the 180, everything is going towards the north side of Salinas. In your opinion, is that due to the continuous pumping 12 months out of the year?
There's also geology has some to do. The aquifers in the east side, those layers are less transmissive. So when you pump water, it takes longer for that water to recover. And there's also two faults on the northeast of Salinas, which seem to also affect why there's a trough in that area.
Faults? You said?
Faults.
Faults. So the water's just.
I don't have a lot of information on those, but it seems to be a factor as well.
Okay, thank you.
Guillermo, we talked about this at the BMP meeting. Can you put up the map that you had the contours and you showed Spreckles with the -20, where you classified it as Spreckles? Next one.
This one?
It's a 400-foot. Yep, that's it. So you got a -20 butted up against pretty much the city limits of Marina. If you follow those contours lines of -10 and -20, you got one ending in Marina and the other one ending at the Dole plant. And then you got this circle at 20. So that's across the street from the East Garrison. There was an area there, Fort Ord owns that. They used to farm it as organic ground, and there's a well field there. Is that where you're collecting the information? Is that an ag well that you're getting that information from?
We're getting the information from an ag well, I believe, but in the valley, not in the.
And how do you know it's a -20 at that spot off Reservation Road?
Well, the tools that we use, they use a mathematical process that's called kriging, and it looks at the data, and and we set a boundary just for the valley. I believe the boundary stops before reservation, and it doesn't go further from reservation.
Yeah, the ground is similar in that area, but there are new wells out there. There's some old wells out. Like I said, it's been 20 years since it was farmed out there, but it was farmed quite heavily
Okay.
as organic ground. And Fort Ord, I think, is the owner of that ground. I'm just curious, because stopping at Marina, we talked about this at BMP, we're going to need more information. We're getting more people to come online, and I appreciate it. I would classify that instead of Spreckles, more Marina.
When
Negative 20, that is. That one little.
yes, and when I mentioned sprinkles, I was talking about the area in Chular. So
okay.
Chular saw increases, but if you move just slightly towards Spreckles, you can see some decreases there.
Negative 10, or, okay.
Yes.
That's fine. Going back to Mike's, and I brought this up at the BMP, is we need to look at the whole valley as a whole. Water comes from, it's one source, one basin. And it is a timing issue of water coming from the south to the north. But as pressure is diminished to the south, it's going to affect the pressure to the north. And so as the big picture, I think for actual timing, yeah, it doesn't affect it right now, looking at what South County does, but next year, the year after it does. So it might give you a better overall, which I brought up at BMP, a better understanding of what we're looking at in the future. And I think we agreed that we're going to look, further for some more information toward that aspect. Thank you, Guillermo.
Thank you. Other board members?
Mikey?
Oh, yeah.
And if I could add to John's comments, also even having the river data, how much flows that we're having through the river and how that impacts those contours, and comparatively to you're showing wet years, but the wet years may not relate to how much flow we're actually having down based on the prior years if it was a drought season or something. So what really I think is driving these contours and moving is the flow from the river. We can have good river flow even though we don't have a good rainfall year, right? Because of the storage at the reservoirs. So I think that may actually be more of a critical component to it than actual rainfall.
Okay. And we do have that information in our quarterly conditions reports, but we will look into adding that.
I don't know how you overlay that on top of it and not make it too busy, but I think it's an important aspect of what's happening.
All right, let me go to the public. Is there anyone in the public that can speak on this item?
Chair, I had staff member Amy Woodrow with her hand raised.
Absolutely, Amy.
Thank you. Actually, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Guillermo did touch on what I was hoping to say, just referring to our quarterly conditions report that incorporates the groundwater level data as well as flow conditions, and that sort of for that bigger picture. So thank you for letting me chime in.
Is there anyone else from the public?
No hands raised.
And I'll close the public comment portion of it. I see none in the chambers. A couple comments and observations. One, it seems that from our prior 2023 wet year, there was a slowdown in the progression. Would that be fair to say? And I also wanted to highlight at the same time, while we had a wet year, our agricultural community has done an amazing job on our irrigation and conservation efforts too. So obviously that plays a portion to that. Where I saw most of the movement and elevation reductions, I would consider in the 400. Is that a fair assessment?
They also overall increases, just very small areas that saw a decrease, but those happened in the east of Salinas, just a small area. There was another small areas near Spreckles and another one near Espinosa Lake. But overall, everything increased.
All right. But in the 400, it just felt like I saw a little more in the 400 as opposed to the 140. 140 seemed to have more rebound.
It was very similar.
Okay.
It's just that the deeper, so the 400 aquifer, it's deeper, and so the water levels on those aquifers are already lower, but they did see an increase from last year.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so the point I'm trying to get to, and this next thing I think was kind of relates to what Mike and John has mentioned is, and I don't know how we can get that information incorporated or if it's available, but it would be interesting on the river flow portion is, can we also highlight when we had stream maintenance to see if there was extra groundwater replenishment? But my overall take is especially showing a wet year, the impact of agricultural conservation on the irrigation methods is a need for replenishment, so groundwater sustainability focused at the 400 level could be very, very beneficial, because a good wet year kind of held off a little bit. And if we can get ahead of that curve, we can actually start making a dent. But the 400, where it takes longer to get down to, would be just something I would suggest is where we would focus additional waters or the banking of waters. That would be a great place. And that's just my take from the presentation. I'm a layman. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about most of the time, but I appreciate it. Anyone, final comments?
You probably know more than most of us, so that's pretty good. I mean, if we want to add a whole other layer, right, once we get the GIMS data in and what was actually pumped, obviously in a wet year, we usually have the ability in ag to use less water in the first place. But I think another factor that we saw this year that's kind of happening, well, probably throughout the state, but for sure here in Monterey County, is you saw I saw more prime ag ground not farmed this year. So, I mean, I think if we want to talk about all the intricacies of everything, right, and I don't know how the hell we get there. It's just a lot of information. But I think it'd be interesting to see, I mean, groundwater pumped is going to be less because it's a wet year. But I think there's actually acres, I know there's acres that weren't farmed, specifically from the wine grape industry. We've got a lot of acres coming out. So there's a whole bunch of these factors. I think the overall writing, obviously, is I was actually happy to see that it's kind of back-to-back wet years. And, I mean, we've seen wet years, and you still saw some saltwater islands and stuff. So it was nice to not see, I mean, basically that it was holding, and, if we just have about 20 more wet years, we should be fine. Right? Okay. Anyhow, I just think it's super complex. Yeah.
Adding what Jason said, and we've had 2 wet years. We, as growers, use less water because the ground's already got a water table that's higher. So you don't need to pre-water 18 hours, you need to pre-water 4 hours. So in general, we are conserving water because the ground's holding its moisture. So it is unique on wet years, and I don't know if we need 20, but it should be nice to have about 10, so.
And just to clarify, I do not believe it gets said enough of the importance of what the agricultural community does. And I didn't know about the reduction of acres. I just know that over time, when you look at the graph and the amount of acres that are produced and how the water use is actually flattening out with more production, it's easy to villainize the agricultural community, but they're never praised for all that they've done. So, and I will always do that, just so you all know. Thank you for that presentation. Kelly, this doesn't require a motion, right? Just review?
No motion needed,
All
Chair.
right, we'll move on to item number 3, an update on the Water Resource Agency Habitat Conservation Plan with Jason.
Afternoon, Chair LeBar, members of the board. Jason Demers, Operations Manager with the Water Resources Agency. The item I have for you today is an update on the agency's habitat conservation plans. As you all know, the agency is currently in the process of developing the Salinas River Operations Habitat Conservation Plan, or SROHCP is the acronym that we've assigned to that. HCPs are planning documents that are required as part of an application for an incidental take permit under the Endangered Species Act. They describe the anticipated effects of the proposed taking, how those impacts will be minimized or mitigated, and then how the HCP itself will be funded. So I just want to reposition there. The agency is seeking an incidental take permit for federally listed species related to our core operations and maintenance activities. Those include releases from both Nacimiento and San Antonio dams, operations and maintenance of our agency owned facilities, including the SRDF and the Castroville seawater intrusion distribution system, as well as sandbar management of the Salinas Lagoon. So going back to 2018, the agency began a phased approach to developing a habitat conservation plan. In 2019, we completed the Salinas River Long-Term Management Plan, which was kind of an informational baseline document to help inform HCP development that was grant funded. In 2020, the agency entered into a charter with National Marine Fisheries Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, kind of formalizing our commitment to pursue development of the Salinas River Operations HCP. And then in 2021 and 22, we secured multiple grants to begin funding the development of those HCPs, of the Operations HCP. And currently we're working on the Operations HCP and beginning the planning process for the CEQA and NEPA analysis for that document. So most of the work completed to date has been done under grant funding. We have 3 primary grants we're working under now. The first is the 2019 Section 6 HCP grant, which was awarded in April of 2020. The term for that grant was 2022 through March 2024, so we've just wrapped that one up. And then we have a Proposition 1 IRWM grant that was also awarded in 2020, and the funding term was August of 2021 through July of 2025. And we'll be looking for an extension on that one to see if we can stretch that out just a bit longer. And then the third grant is a 2021 Section 6 grant that was also awarded in 2021. The term for that is April 2022 through November of 2025. So we're currently funded through at least November of 2025, looking for an extension on the IRWM grant. So some of the activities that were completed under that grant funding, this is a list of kind of the primary projects that were done under the 2019 grant. It includes a Salinas River Lagoon delineation, Gavilan Creek watershed assessment and report, Lis Bells Vireo surveys and reports, Arroyo Seco steelhead habitat assessments, a report regarding striped bass in the Salinas watershed, annual lagoon and Salinas River seining reports from 2021 through 2023, steelhead index reach monitoring surveys for that same period, development of the covered species accounts, critical habitat and range for the species that we're looking to cover, development of draft covered activities, development of draft methods for impact assessment, development of draft biological goals and objectives, updates to the project website, and then a 10-year review of Salinas Valley Water Project operations, and then the draft outline for the operations HCP. I know it's kind of a big list, but bear with me, there's only a couple more of those. The 2021 grant covered a similar number of key activities. Those include Tidewater Gobi surveys and reports, a Tidewater Gobi study plan for the lower Salinas, Salinas River Lagoon fish community sampling and reports, draft dam and reservoir passage feasibility study, Nacimiento and San Antonio habitat modeling, our developed approach for ESA coverage under Section 7 and Section 10, continued work on predation effects related to steelhead and a monitoring plan, some habitat modeling in San Antonio and Nacimiento rivers, a draft tech memo describing the habitat modeling, index reach monitoring for 2024, evaluation of conservation grazing practices for the agency-owned properties around the reservoirs, and then continued development of those covered activities and development of an effects analysis for reptiles and amphibians. And then we're currently working under this grant on the administrative draft of the HCP and then our CEQA and NEPA strategy. Then under the IRWM grant, there's a much smaller list, but these are definitely critical activities that are still ongoing. The first of those was the use of a decision support tool, and that would be the USGS model. So it covered some work done so that we can use the Salinas Valley operational model to do the analysis for the HCP. It covered our critical riffle analysis that helped us identify the flows needed for steelhead to pass through the Salinas River corridor. It did comparison point modeling, which is kind of like the baseline model runs that we're going to use to compare the future reoperation scenarios to. It also covered reservoir reoperation scenario modeling, which is currently in progress, and our stakeholder outreach process, including our technical advisory committee. So I'll take a second to highlight a little bit of the work that's being done under that IRWIM grant, primarily that stakeholder outreach process. We developed a stakeholder planning group that was established as a forum to discuss and inform development of the operations HCP. It includes a 16-member advisory group that represents a number of different interests within our plan area, which is the Salinas Valley and all of our the area covered and impacted by our facilities. All of those meetings that are held for the stakeholder planning group are open to the public. We held our first workshop in June of 2023, and that was largely an introduction to the HCP process and goals of the stakeholder outreach process. Second workshop was in August of 2023, and that was a discussion, larger discussion of our covered activities that we're looking to cover under the plan. And then after that second meeting, we really shifted our efforts into the technical advisory committee so we could focus on some of the reservoir reoperation protocols and get down into the weeds a little more and discuss the technical details. And then we'll come back to the larger stakeholder group probably in the first quarter of next year. So the technical advisory committee was kind of a spinoff from the larger group that was created to assist in the development and review of the reservoir reoperations protocols. That's currently 13 members. They all have technical expertise in the fields of biology, hydrology, engineering, geology, hydrologic modeling, or water management. The first meeting held with the TAC was December of 2023. And again, that was kind of an introduction to the HCP process and goals. We met again in February 2024, where we talked about the modeling tools, the technical details, the limits of the models, and what tools we have to help develop reoperation protocols. We also went into a lot of detail on the critical riffle analysis for steelhead passage in the Salinas and then discuss the critical components that need to be incorporated into future reservoir reoperation scenarios. Our third meeting was in August of 2024, and that's where we started talking about the HCP comparison point scenario modeling. We talked about some steelhead habitat modeling in the Nasmiano and San Antonio rivers. And then we started a preliminary outline of the reoperation scenarios to be modeled in the future. Our most recent meeting was in November, and we looked at revised fish passage flows that came from that the Salinas River a drone modeling that was done for the critical riffle surveys. And then we took in some feedback from the group on concepts for reoperation scenarios that we will continue to model into the future. And our next meeting with that group is scheduled for March of 2025. So I'd also like to provide a quick update on the Salinas River Lagoon and Sandbar Management low effect HCP. You all know during most years, the agency has to perform emergency sandbar management to prevent flooding of the agricultural land and the homes around the Salinas Lagoon area. Every time we do that, that sandbar management has the potential to result in harm to federally listed species. The Salinas River Operations HCP that we're currently working on will cover those species and that activity, but it's a kind of a long ongoing process. We're a couple years in already, and we have a lot more to go. So during the development of the larger HCP, the Fish and Wildlife Service strongly recommended that we come up with a short-term alternative. It was decided that a low-effect HCP was the right tool to get us short-term coverage for those activities. It turns out that the activities covered, because there's so much overlap with the existing HCP process, that a lot of that work could be grant funded. The development timeline was relatively short. I think it took us 16 months from start to finish to do the low effect HCP, and that's primarily because it had a very limited scope. It's one activity, which is lagoon breaching to prevent, or sandbar management to prevent flooding, and it covered 3 species and it had a very limited term of 5 years to give us time to complete the operations HCP. So that low effect HCP and the incidental take permit that it's associated with were approved by the Fish and Wildlife Service in March of 2024. This board recommended adoption in May of 2024, and the Board of Supervisors adopted in June. Now we've moved on to implementation of that plan. Our first annual report was submitted in November. It included a summary of the mitigation work that's been done to date. We haven't had sandbar management that was performed under this plan because it was completed after our last sandbar management activity, so we largely just reported on the mitigation actions. That includes a research study to better understand the distribution and life history of tidewater goby in the lower Salinas area, including other parts of the watershed in the region like Elkhorn Slough and some of the other connected water bodies. Sampling for that was performed in July and September, and now it was largely eDNA sampling, so now we're in the process of analyzing those results and putting the report together. We've also made a contribution to the state park's snowy plover recovery plan that consists of purchasing and installing some wildlife-resistant trash cans to prevent predation of snowy plovers near the Salinas River State Beach. And then we have just completed our first treatment round of 1 acre of land in support of the state park's invasive management program. And that was removal of ice plants on 1 acre near Salinas River State Beach. Like I said, first treatment was completed in December, and then we'll have a follow-up at this time next year. And just as a reminder, development of the habitat conservation plans aligns with our agency strategic plan Goal D, Strategy 1, Goal B, Strategy 4, and Goal C, Strategy 6. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Jason. That was a great presentation. Board members, start with Mike.
Thanks, Jason. How does the HCP tie into everything that we're doing with Sigma? You know, like a potential new inflatable dam, water coming down the valley, diversion points. How does this, the potential interlake tunnel, how does this all tie into that so that we have something that's dynamic that can be adjusted with changes with our water infrastructure and projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've had a lot of conversations with the GSAs about that. We're talking about that internally, but in order to cover something under an HCP, there's a number of criteria that have to be met. And they include actions that are under agency control already, things that can be well-defined and measured, because we need to measure the effects to any species on those. So it's really hard to cover actions that might be out there in the future. It's tough to speculate on how those might play out. So the focus of the HCP is really on current operations and maintenance of our facilities.
So once we've completed an HCP, right? I mean, there's going to be some management of it, right? So when you take in that management and then you say, okay, you know what, we're going to do another project. We're going to do a CSIP 2.0. We have to have more water coming down, or we're going to do another diversion point throughout the river, or inflatable dam. Is this now a hindrance to us? Is this going to stop us to be able to do it, or are we putting some type of method that's there's flexibility within this?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think that it would stop us. It depends on the type of project that we're working on. If we're doing a construction project of some kind, there are other methods to get to an incidental take permit, like Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, that would result in a biological opinion, for example. So there are definitely other ways to get to ESA coverage for individual projects. And then there will be an adaptive management component of the HCP that could cover some future changes. And I guess worst case, if need be, we would have to reopen if it's something that really drastically altered the way that we operate things now.
Okay. And another question, how are some of the other agencies viewing our process? Have you had a lot of communication with like NIMS?
We work actually really closely with NIMS and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We meet with them monthly. So we're going over things piece by piece. All of those studies we complete, we bring to them for review along the way. So NIMS has been highly engaged. Fish and Wildlife has been highly engaged. So it's just a process, and we're partway through. But our communication with them is frequent and fairly open.
Jason, thank you. I asked for this, just get a nice update. You were talking about getting an extension on that $750,000 grant. July of 25 is when it ends. You're going to need it. You want an extension till the end of the year, or what are you looking at?
I'd like to go out until, I think the extension that was submitted was till spring of 2027. We won't need that much time to spend the funds. We'll have gone through the bulk of it this coming summer. We may even get through all of it before July, but we want to get an extension in just in case we can't spend it all by then. And that's largely funding that reservoir reoperation modeling that we're doing. And as you might imagine, money goes quickly with model runs and modeled.
So on one of the slides, you were showing all the projects. A lot of it had to deal with steelhead, the endangered species. I saw evaluation of conservation grazing, but I didn't see anything on river maintenance. Back in '95, when we had our first big flood that I can remember vividly, I didn't know we had so many endangered species in the river. But something we did a lot of river maintenance because we were exempt, and it helped improve your endangered species. And it just seems like you've got a half dozen categories that you're working on endangered species. there should be some correlation between that and maintenance of the river from the reservoirs to the mouth. And that would benefit everything you talked about. And yet I don't see anything. Where's that?
Yeah, that's one of the items we talked about early on with the advisory committee that we put together. One of the issues is that the HCP really, we have the screening criteria that I mentioned that includes activities that the agency has control over, activities that we're already doing essentially. So we're looking for a permit under the Endangered Species Act primarily to perform activities that we're already doing, operations and maintenance. So adding something new to it it's really difficult because we can't analyze the impact until we know what the activity is. So the current Salinas River maintenance program has been transferred to the RCD of Monterey County for implementation. So the agency is not the primary agency that's responsible for that implementation right now. So we can really only cover activities in the HCP that we already have well-defined and that are under our control.
As a property owner along the river, I would like to see the Water Resource Agency take control of that. RCD is okay, but that is something that controls the flooding in this valley, which the Water Resource Agency is in control of. And as the river gets plugged, it creates flooding. So you've got to find, there again, I'll bring a correlation between the two. And I don't care whether you work with RCD, but it has to be under Water Resource Agency management because it ties into everything you're doing, along with flooding. And for a long-term program, it seems like it'd be beneficial, it'd be a win-win situation. So I guess you've got to find a way to work that thing in.
Yeah, we'll still be involved, but transfer of that permit to the RCD was something that came out of our strategic planning process from a couple years back. So it was adopted in our strategic plan as one of the items that would be moved away from agency staff, just because of the time that it was taking us. So it's something that we've followed through with the staff. We've gone ahead and transferred that permit, or we're almost finished with the permit transfers. But we're still involved. It's just not, we're not the lead agency on that anymore.
And in '95, nobody wanted to touch this thing. When we had our initial flood, and there was a group of individuals from the whole valley, 12 of us, that started a coalition and worked with the politicians to actually be able to get in the river and do the work. I would hope down the way that Water Resource Agency reevaluates that, and because it does fall into your parameters of flood control. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to add to John's and echo some of his comments. It is our responsibility. It is in our jurisdiction. We're going to be in charge of the HCP. When you look at the water that is flowing from that river, it is the agency's water, and it is being consumed by vegetation that we can't seem to get rid of, and it's a mess. The RCD is just an outside contractor. We can bring it back in-house. We're still paying for that outside contractor. We can bring it in-house and pay for it here as well, and hopefully in that process get things moved along better. But our agency has to get back into the driver's seat on this thing. The water is too valuable to just let it get consumed up with arundo and willows, et cetera, because it's too difficult to get into the river and do something. We need to be able to get in there. It's a critical point when you look at Sigma, at low-hanging fruit for what can actually impact this valley and get us to a level of sustainability. That vegetation is a direct hindrance to that. And having that vegetation under control is a game changer in this valley. And it's relatively cheap as opposed to $1.5 billion extraction barrier. So we need to get the water, we need to save the water, and this is our only conduit that we have, and so we need to maintain that conduit.
Thank you, Mike. Any other directors have any comments or questions? All right, I'll take this to the public. Any member of the public like to speak on this item?
No hands raised.
And no one in chambers. I'll close the public comment. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Now move on to item 4, consent calendar. We only have one item. Does any director want to pull the item? Is there any member of the public who could speak on the consent calendar number 4?
Move to approve.
No hands raised.
Thank you. We have a first with
Second.
Jason, second with John. All in favor? Aye. Against? Passes unanimously. Excuse me. We'll move on to action items number 5. Consider approving amendment number 3 of the agreement for professional services with GEI Consultants. Guillermo?
Good afternoon, Chair Levar and members of the board. My name is Guillermo Alvarez. I am a water resources engineer at the Water Resources Agency, and today's actions are okay, today's action is consider approving amendment number 3 of the agreement for professional services with GEI Consultants in the amount of $156,000 for engineering design and project management services for storm damage, repair design, and implementation of the Nacimiento Dam hydro plant's South Access Road, and authorize the general manager to execute the amendment. Committee actions, none. In prior Board of Directors actions, the original agreement was approved on January 1st, 2023. Amendment number 1 was approved on May 26th, 2023, and amendment number 2 was approved on April the 2nd, 2024. The financial impact for this is $156,000 payable from Fund 116 Nacimiento and FEMA reimbursable, and we have a FEMA authorized project on this. Discussion. The purpose of this amendment is to increase the amount payable on contract by $156,000 for a contract not to exceed an amount of $596,000. These amendments allows GEI to assist the agency with engineering and project management services to complete repairs to the South Access Road damaged during 2023 storms. And, well, FEMA has authorized repairs. The damage to the Nacimiento South Access Road caused by 2023 storms, the slope area above the hydroelectric plant building and near the South Access Road drainage culvert has been affected by erosion caused by the 2023 storms, requiring the construction of a retention wall to stabilize the access road and prevent further deterioration. And well, then again, today's action is approve the amendment number 3 of the agreement for professional services with GEI Consultant Incorporated in the amount of $156,000 for engineering design and project management services for storm damage, repair, design, and implementation of the Nacimiento Dam hydro plant's south access road, and authorize the general manager to execute the amendment.
I appreciate the presentation. Board members, any questions or comments on this item?
I got one.
Yes, please.
After GEI completes its work, the work will be put in a form so that the construction work will come back to us for a bid process?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, is there any member of the public to speak on this item?
No hands raised.
And none in chambers, I'll bring this back for action.
Move to approve as presented.
First with Mark, second with Deidre, all in favor? Aye. Against? Passes unanimously, thank you, everybody. All right, we have our key information. I do want to bring up one point for January and February for the finance and personnel and administration. I had asked that we swap those times out. Is there some kind of action that is needed by this board? So that finance would commence at 8:30 and P&A would start at 10.
No.
Okay.
Sorry about that. No, it just needs to be agendized and it'll be a special meeting if it's a different time. Say that again. Oh, a permanent change.
A permanent change.
There's nothing this board needs to do.
Okay, so that permanent change will start in January?
Yeah, and when you set your regular meeting schedule for
Okay.
each committee, you'll make that change clear when you adopt that item.
Thank you. So that is just a heads up. That'll be coming forward on that. Was there any questions or comments on any of the scheduled items for the calendar? All right, does any member of the public like to speak on that? Item 6, calendar or key events?
No hands raised.
And seeing none in the chambers, thank you. We'll move on to a general manager's report. Ara?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with the personnel update. On December 9th, we closed the application window for our dam maintenance superintendent position. We had a number of applicants, thankfully, and HR is working through the review and interview scheduling process. We have also been holding interviews for a water resources technician, anticipating the need to expand our staff to support the SVB's work, as well as the expansion of our groundwater monitoring program. And we will continue to explore that addition to staff, once we find the right quality person to be able to assume that responsibility. Lastly, with our comp and class study, which we've been talking about some time, we received word last week from County HR that they are working to schedule the meet and confer meetings to notify the unions of the agency's proposal to perform this study, as well as HR preparing to reach out to vendors about the work potential. And so, given where we are on the calendar, I would be hopeful that all of this is completed early in the new year, and then we can move on with this effort. So that concludes my personnel update. Shifting into dam safety funding, the bigger project right now that's been moving is the Nacimiento Plunge Pool project. The initial geotechnical field investigation has been completed of the rock outcrop material, and those samples are undergoing analysis. We are currently awaiting a scope of work from AECOM for the slope protection project.
Hey, that was me. I'm sorry.
And are looking forward to bringing a contract amendment to this board in January to support that work. The aim here, because of the lifespan of the grant that we're working under, this is the $6 million 2023 DWR grant. We are aiming to commence construction in 2026 as that grant expires in 27. Shifting gears to San Antonio, sad news, on November 26th, we received notice from DWR that we would not be receiving an award of a FEMA rehabilitation of high-hazard potential dam grants. That was the grant that we had applied for back in February for the low-level outlet works rehabilitation project. Essentially, what DWR said was with the limited funding is, aligned or assigned to the state, there just wasn't enough dollars to support this project. Encouraged us to reapply, and we have reapplied on that project under the state's dam safety projects, and that application was submitted, if I recall, late October. And so we will continue to chase those state and federal funding opportunities, but as you all know, there's never any guarantee. Finally, during the Aqua Conference, I had an opportunity to meet with our municipal financial advisor, Fieldman Rollop, to discuss capital financing options for our dam safety projects. I had asked them to prepare some options considering a hypothetical $200 million project. And so some of those options that we talked about range from traditional fixed rate municipal bonds, WIFIA loans, or their Army Corps equivalent SRF loans, the use of commercial paper for potential support of interim funding needs. We talked about pros and cons of general obligation bonds compared to special benefit assessments and hybrid approaches. And so the thing that becomes clear when you're just plugging in a flat number and just looking at the changes in these options is, assuming a 30-year horizon, the difference can be, at least in these scenarios and their initial, of course, the change can be as much as $65 million, so not insignificant. So we'll definitely be, want to be thoughtful about the path forward. The other thing I found interesting is there has been a turn, I think, in the water community in general on WIFIA loans, and because of more onerous covenants that have been incorporated into more recent agreements, putting more risk on the borrower. And so you see a lot of agencies now shying away from WIFIA loans. We'll keep it in the basket. It's unknown what the new federal administration may do with respect to future covenants, but as it sits right now, that's a growing risk. And those loans right now compared to commercial market are running about 5 points higher anyway, and so we'd want to chase the lower cost money. I am thinking to have Fieldman do a presentation of these big picture hypotheticals for the Finance Committee in February to just sort of begin laying out some of these approaches and starting to get that dialogue going, and so more to come. And I'll pause there on dam safety funding. Shifting gears to Monterey One Water reconciliation process, two areas there I want to touch on. The financial audit, and so following our presentation on the financial audit, the agency in M1 established a leadership group, which has met 3 times since September to provide staff, to review staff work and provide staff direction on their efforts to review and revise sections 7, 8, and 9 of the amended restated water recycling agreement. Those are the financial sections. And so that work is making good progress. The questions in front of us really circle around indirect costs and what are the correct components to include there. And then a lot of work done on section 7 and 8. We'll be putting our attention to section 9 in the coming weeks with the aim of having those parts of the agreement revised and settled upon by spring so we can begin to implement these new changes in the new fiscal year. Regarding the next presentation that Paul and I would be doing on the progress that we're making right now, we are planning on would be to present to this body on January 21st, to the M1 board on January 27th, and to the Water Resource Agency Board of Supervisors on January 28th. So more to come. Turning to the water operations assessment, that's another critical part of this effort. That work, you'll recall, was delayed a year due to the need to calibrate the remote monitoring units that were installed on the physical water meters. That work made great progress through last winter and this spring, and so through this year's irrigation cycle, we were able to capture usable data, which was great progress. We're now beginning to look at initial model results, which are intended to help inform, what are engineering solutions that could be implemented to help improve operations of the CSIP distribution system. Things like, and this has been said before, could storage tanks be developed in certain areas to minimize the need to utilize supplemental wells to compensate for water supply and pressure. So staff is working on that. As that work matures, what I would anticipate is bringing that into Water Quality and Ops Committee for their review, as well as to this body, probably in the February, March timeframe. But making slow but steady progress in the M1 sphere. So pause there for any questions. With respect to the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District's proposal to allocate water for the upcoming Pure Water Monterey expansion project, General Manager for the Water Management District, David Stolt, did a presentation in front of the Board of Supervisors on December 4th. And I spoke after his presentation to express our concerns about how future demand will change as the need to comply with SGMA is realized, and how repurposing some of that water that has been historically excess will necessarily diminish its availability. There is a meeting of the Water Management District's Board of Directors tonight where they will be doing the first reading of their proposed ordinance. I plan to attend and essentially make the 3-minute remark, with those same points. It's stepping back. It's recognizing that Pure Water Monterey has been a great collaboration. It's an important project, but that's built on the when and if the water is available, and it's important to understand how that availability can change going forward as SGMA projects begin to come online in the next 5 to 10 years. So I'll pause there for any questions. Shifting gears to the Aqua Conference, so I was in attendance from December 3rd to December 5th. Perhaps not surprisingly, underlying every presentation was some discussion about the dynamic or the anticipated dynamic between the state and incoming federal administration. As water managers, we're here just to manage the resource, and that's what we want to do. But clearly the politics can affect how and what we focus on. From a project funding perspective, I'm not super optimistic we're going to see a lot of dollars coming out of the 119th Congress. But where I do see the potential for opportunity would be in areas like regulatory streamlining, as an example. And so can we build the relationships and the coalitions around the issues that we think we might be able to make some favorable progress on. So that's what I'm interested in exploring. And that's one area where there may be some opportunity to move forward. Related in the regulatory legislative activities realm, I have been working with the county's advocacy team to develop the 2025 legislative and grant program. Their last meeting was on December 2nd, where the legislative program manager, Annette Diadamo, presented the latest iteration of their project. January, there'll be another meeting. February, there'll be the legislative workshop and ultimate approvals. The priorities, the key priorities for the agencies are unchanged. It's funding for the dam safety projects, and it's the FEMA reimbursability for the damages that we suffered and the repairs that we paid for as a result of the 2023 storms. So we continue to struggle with those FEMA reimbursements and continue to want to focus effort there. 2 new proposals. One would be to pursue federal funding for the repaving of the Nasamiena Lake Drive. As you all know, that section of the road is our responsibility. It is not in good condition. We get often and complaints about the quality of the road there. So hoping we might secure some federal funding there. It's a good project. It's a multi-county benefit project. It's a multi-representative benefit project. So cautiously optimistic. And then the second area that we were pursuing additional federal support was for the homeless encampment resolution. We spend a lot of time and money cleaning up encampments, particularly in the wreck ditch area. These are health and human safety concerns, and so pursuing some federal funding to help support our work in that area and improving our coordination with the county are also priorities. And so next legislative committee meeting on January 13th, and I don't know, I know you follow their work closely, Director Gonzalez. I don't know if there's anything you want to say.
One of the things that came out of that meeting was the non-responsive from FEMA, how it's impacting not only us, but the county, because it's affecting them to be able to provide services because they've got all this other money that's out. It's also affecting a lot of other jurisdictions, cities, municipalities and stuff. And there was a committee that one of the supervisors is on, and that's going to be a key issue. I don't know if it's the county group that he belongs to. They were going to be bringing this up as a strong point on their agendas on how to expedite this funding from FEMA, because it's affecting everybody.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So unless there are any questions on that, it's just kind of the 2025 preview. And, what I really want to say is just how excited I am for 2025. We're going to have a lot of interesting things coming at us straight out of the gate. So, of course, back in October, the Board of Supervisors approved our groundwater monitoring program, and as part of that, the regulatory fee to support it. That Nexus study, we anticipate being the initial draft being done by the end of this calendar year, so we're on target to bring that to the Finance Committee in January and beginning to solicit comments on that document with the aim of ultimately having that fee approved by the Board of Supervisors in June. So we'll be focused on that quite a bit. We talked about this in the last budgeting cycle and chose to hold off on it, but beginning to pivot to the establishment of a dam safety regulatory program. And just in the simple acknowledgement of how much time and energy goes into complying with FERC and DSOD requirements and the strain that is put on Fund 116 and Zone 2C. Also upcoming early in the new year is the grant-funded update of the historical benefits analysis. And so the internal draft of that is winding down. So right now we're on target to bring that to Planning Committee on February 5th. And then probably in the March timeframe, we'll be bringing the grant deliverables for the Interlake Tunnel project. That includes the draft engineer's report. And so, some really interesting stuff there in terms of, not only what are we learning about how things are today, but then what sort of conversations can we and should we have about how things should be in the future, because there's a lot of ideas out there about things that should be changed. And so looking forward to that stakeholder engagement. Jason touched on it here briefly. Of course, the HCP's been making good progress. It's arguably the most important planning effort we have underway. And so looking forward to refining our operations and our covered activities early in the new year and just thinking about how our improved understanding of operations under the HCP will inform our negotiations for the water rights applications and protests on the Interlake Tunnel project. And so a lot of these things just end up being interrelated, right? And so sometimes you're waiting on one before you can move on the other. And so, feeling a lot of momentum as we come into the new year, which means there'll be, a lot of work coming to the committees and to you all. On budget development, right, we'll kick that off in January. We're going to aim to expand the program and project-based approach to this. That's a little by little sort of thing, but definitely working to improve that. The budget workshop will occur in March, as it traditionally does. And so looking forward to getting started with that conversation. And lastly, of course, the strategic planning on February 18th. Hopefully you all received your save the dates. We'll be doing the update of the existing plan. So kind of our 2024 year in review. And then, shortly after that, as we move further into the 2025 year, we'll begin the revision to that plan for the next iteration. And we've been having a lot of conversation internally with the management team about what that could look like. And so that's been great. So some really exciting things on the horizon, and just wanted to take a minute and preview that for you. And so enjoy the holiday season, and then, buckle up.
All right, I got one. We've got less than a week to get an extension on the 2018 Farm Bill, and it doesn't even look like we'll get that. And I can remember being back in Washington, D.C. 5-6 years ago, working on a new Farm Bill in 2020, and we've done nothing since 2018 on that Farm Bill. And it doesn't look like the next 4 days are going to do anything, extend it, change it, do anything. We'll lose it. And that's a lot of funding that we'll miss out on. It's unfortunate. They're supposedly going to fast track it in the spring when the new House and new Senate is in place, but that's going to be it's a mess back east. It's a mess north of us. It's a mess. So, and FEMA, like I said, I don't know. I don't know if we can count on FEMA money ever. We'll see. Thank you, Mara.
I got one. Just in regards to the DWR funding, I get so aggravated because we miss a lot, but then I got to keep hope alive because we do win some, like the 17 million that you got repurposed. The fish screen, so we're able to reuse that. But man, it just gets so aggravating when we got a lot of staff time that goes into this, and I know they put good grants together, and then we miss out on these valuable ones, and we just got to keep our heads up. But no, I appreciate staff still stepping up to the base and swinging.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that recognition a lot, and you're exactly right. They work really hard to make great applications. We'll continue to swing.
All right, we'll move on to committee reports. Start with ResOp.
We had a ResOp meeting on Thursday, the 12th, and just talked about water levels, releases, how our year end is looking. We should finish with our estimates that were made back in January. It looks like we'll end up 5 feet higher than our initial estimates on both reservoirs. Well, 5 feet higher on Nassie, might be 7 feet higher on San Antonio on our initial estimates made back in actual March of this year. So it was a good meeting, quick. Then I had a basin management meeting on the 4th, and everything Guillermo talked about was covered in that meeting.
Planning.
Yeah, we met at the beginning of the month to talk about the strategic planning meeting for February. We've also are starting to talk about governance for the board of directors and how things work. So a lot more exciting things coming.
Thank you so much. Finance and P&A were canceled. We did have correspondence. Chair Church sent letters to Congresswoman Lofgren, Congressman Panetta, Senator Butler, and Padilla regarding support for Salinas River language in HR 8812, and additionally to Don Addis, our assembly member. So we appreciate his work on that. And additionally, we have, and those letters are attached to the agenda, Board of Director comments.
And if I might real quickly, on the letters regarding the WRDA reconciliation, my understanding is the WRDA bill that was passed did ultimately include the Salinas River.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So Board of Member comments, I'll start with Deidre and we'll work down the way if you have anything you want to say.
Just to the staff, great job, and everybody, Merry Christmas.
Same thing, and hopefully everybody gets some time off and the weather stays nice and calm, so everybody's not up at wee hours of the morning. And let's see, John and Mike, happy birthday. John, I think it's your 70th birthday. Happy birthday.
170.
107. Mike, you're 21. All right, thank you.
I just want to wish a happy birthday and, to these guys, as well as Happy New Year to everybody, and Merry Christmas. And it sounds like it's going to be a very busy coming year.
Yeah, so staff, you're the best staff there is in the county. Water Resources Agency is a top agency in the county. Thank you for all the hard work. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And Mikey, happy birthday. Even though the day after Christmas, but it still counts. So, thank you.
I just want staff to take a grain of salt as Santa Claus the Clown is telling you how awesome you are. I don't disagree with that. I will say this, right? It's and we all have a lot of stuff, and in this world we live in and county we live in, it's pretty crazy. But let's all find a little time to not answer the phone and spend time with family and friends. And if John calls, tell him you can talk to him after the new year. So, thank you for all your work. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Yeah, thank you for the birthday wishes, John. Happy birthday to you, 24th. Merry Christmas to everybody. And I'd like to say thank you to the staff, and also appreciation to the staff that are out in the field. You know, it's wintertime, storms, rain events, and I know they're going to be out there in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning. We appreciate it. We appreciate all the work that they do. And stay safe, because those conditions can get pretty intense at times. So thank you to all those as well.
All right, a couple points first. So next month, I'll be making appointments to our committees. There are a couple of vacancies. If any member of the public is interested for any of the eligible positions, contact staff and they'll let you know what's available. I do want to let the Board of Directors know that last year when I came on, I left committees as was, but had great conversations with planning because I want to see more leadership development. So there will be changes in chairs so that we have it spread out, that every committee has a different board member that's chairing it. And I just want to give everyone a heads up on that one. But if you know people who want to participate, please let them know. If any of the board members have a preference to be on a different committee, let me know as well. So by the time we get to the January meeting, we're ready to go. And lastly is just, I am very, very thankful to serve with this board. Everyone up here is so committed to doing the best work for our community and our county, and it really shows. And we're struggling with so many different issues, but it heartens me to see that it never wears you down. You just keep moving, and I think that's something that's natural here in Monterey County. We just keep working. We know it has to be done, and we don't stop until it's done. So I'm thankful to serve with every one of you. Staff, I gotta say, absolute pleasure. You have the integrity, the ethics, and most importantly, the passion for what you train to do and you do it well for all of our residents. Because it's not just the county, it's actually goes all the way down to the families, to the schools, because water is everywhere and water is needed for us to sustain life. I have always said that you are the technical experts everything about Monterey County when it comes to water, and I appreciate you so much. Ara, Kelly, thank you for your work. And with that, everyone have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year. We adjourn at 2:38 p.m.